what are we up to today? Well, hopefully this is an easy one. And excuse the MS treatment rash on my hands. I'm sure some of you are going to ask about that later. This is a side effect of having MS. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today, my apprentice has her tablet and she's always in here to charge off the USB charging ports that are in this room. We have restricted them through most of the house so that she does actually go to sleep once in a while. As she's got older, we're now facing a problem where my autistic apprentice is having some trouble going to sleep without that. So we've opted instead to get a charging device that we can put on her bunk bed, and we've just set up a custom DNS so that we can control exactly what she can see and when. But we'll go into detail about that at a later date. Today we're talking about the hardware. So let's get into this guy here. This I bought at a premium price from my local JCar store, and it comes with a couple of different configurable options. You can configure it to fit into this little housing like such, and I have a twin version of this in my ambulance, or we have a nice little mount like so, which you can mount, or there's a flush mount. It's all pretty interesting stuff, but knowing my apprentice and her propensity to mess with things, we're going to put it in this one. Now they give you some nice little crimp connectors, some right angle crimp connectors. These things are okay, but they're also shocking. So we're probably going to solder direct to this unit, and we'll put our little lock ring in, which these little lugs here, you pretty much got to do up with a screwdriver. And I think it's got ridges on both sides, so you can't get it backwards. Okay, so let's measure out how much cable we need. Luckily I have already measured, so I have a big roll of this stuff here. So we'll be back once I've measured out an appropriate length. I have measured out 4 arm spans, and I figured that I'd probably need around about 3. We have a blob of blue tack here to hold this guy down. Now it's worth noting we're going to power this off a little 2 amp supply. Now you guys might argue that this is a 4.1 amp charger. That's true, but this is at 5 volts, this is at 12 volts. So Ohm's law says that if you double the voltage, you halve the amps, and we're a bit more than double the voltage. So we should have the equivalent of around about 4 amps capability on this, except we're probably only ever going to be using one port at a time, and the regulator on this is only really good for about 2 amps at 5 volts. So we should be well under our capacity by about 50% in a normal duty cycle. Any secondary device that we're likely to charge on this is probably going to be a low current one, like a set of Bluetooth speakers. So let's get some additional tools here. The soldering iron is warming up, and we will have a noisy exhaust fan. That's going to be a project coming up over the winter, is going to be denoising my exhaust system and rejigging my window vent. Alright, so the other end is unterminated at this point. Whoa. So let's do this. Now I know I have an autoimmune disorder, namely multiple sclerosis, that I mentioned at the start of the video. There are some reports that lead could have something to do with that, and that's quite surprising considering the amount of time I've dealt with lead. Anyway, let's turn on my exhaust fan, which is right near the microphone, guys. It's actually going to be fairly quiet today, which is nice. Let's tin these. I'm using 60-40 tin lead, that's why I started talking about lead. And it does have some significant impacts on the autoimmune system, along with your brain and a whole bunch of other things. So I have had my lead levels checked, and I think that I was at a moderate to low level for a lead worker, which I think is an interesting metric. I will have to go back to those tests at some point and see what they said. Now I'm going to go with the Chinese standard here and use the trace wire as positive, but then again that's not really a standard with Chinese. I've seen that go wrong before. So That means negatives on the top, so we're going to flip these guys. I would normally put heat shrink on these, but it's going to be inside that nice shroud, nicely protected, so I don't think we're going to worry too much about heat shrink for this. Now, I saw the lights dip when I touched this, and I had to check that I had actually disconnected it. There's a UPS I have in the house that's connected to the house battery, and it's given me a mains earth link to the negative on my battery system, which is not ideal. So sometimes when I touch a positive wire with my soldering iron, which is earthed, it shorts out things. So I'll put a fairly low value fuse. I've got to pull all this cable through. I put a fairly low value fuse on the thingamajig that I'm trying to think of and can't. I'm trying to do two things at once. This is what brain lesions do to you guys. So I've put a fairly low value fuse on my test board off to the right over here, which I won't bother showing you right now. So if I have something to connect it and I touch it with the soldering iron earth, it shorts out the 12 volt system. But I've put something like about I think a 2 amp fuse in there, and that blows generally before I do any harm to things. Nothing like having a messy desk off camera and having to pull a big roll of cable through it. Okay, here we go. Get this guy in. Now this can require a little bit of finesse because there's just so much thread on this thing. I really wish they put less thread on these. Well, but then again, if you've got to put it through something thick, it would be nice, but the rest of the time it's a pain in the proverbial rear end. I'm not sure if I've repeated myself with that phrasing a few times, but I probably have. Alright, we'll get this guy up and then we'll find ourselves a decent screwdriver to do the rest of the job. Alright, that's about as tight as I'm going to get it with my thumb, so let's get a screwdriver. Now ordinarily I would attempt to do this with needle nose pliers, but I put mine in my tool bag and locked it up in 6-wheel drive the other day, and I don't want to go and get it. Right, that is about as tight as I'm going to get it, and probably about as tight as I need it. And I got it mostly straight this time. I'm sure that's going to bother somebody's OCD. It will mine, but I'm not going to be staring at it. Alright, now I want to mount this thing flush, and I'm probably going to need to have that cable come out a hole. So I think I'm going to drill myself, actually no, rather than drill a hole, I'm going to cut a little square slot with flush cutters. Let's see if I can make an ass of myself right about now. Start just a little bit like this, and then we'll work our way in. And we might just, you've got to be careful doing this because you can end up with a slot that goes all the way through the casing. Now, substitute for my pliers, let's use my Leatherman because I always have that on me. Alright, there's a nice little cable slot that can sit in there. Now I am going to whack a little bit of hot glue in here just as a strain relief. Actually, you know what? I might whack a zip tie around that cable and that might work a little bit better. Let's find another zip tie. Alright, this guy should hopefully increase the diameter of that cable enough that it won't pull through that slot. And give it a little bit of slack in there so it can't put too much force on it. Oh, that pulled through. You lied to me, zip tie. Let's see how we go now. That's good. Alright. That should provide some strain relief, and we will certainly need it with my apprentice. Alright, and I won't hot glue that in yet because I'm not sure of the exact position that I'm going to put it in. Let's tend to the other end. That's what she said. Alright, now, stick that down so we don't lose it off the desk. I'm going to run my hands through the whole length of this. Get rid of that. And get another bit of blue tack. Just stick it down off camera so we don't lose it. Now, the bit everybody forgets. Put the shroud on first. Okay. Now, we are doing a center positive on these. So we're going to do the white stripe to the center pin. Let me have a look and double check. Yes, white stripe is on the positive. Okay, so for this end, I'm not going to use the automatic strippers because we need a really short bit of wire here. Alright, turn on our exhaust fan. Solder you. Just a little bit because we don't want it too fat. It's also something that she might have said. And I need to turn this cable off, disconnect it over there. Alright, with a slight, just snip the tip, just the tip. Oh, it's a good day for innuendos. Alright, stick that down with blue tack. This stuff is magic. I'm surprised not more people don't use it. You got to be careful with these cheap plugs. If you get that solder cup hot enough to bond with the solder, it also melts the plastic. Sometimes you need to plug the plug in, make sure the pin stays intact when you solder it. Alright, so now we can arrange. Normally I would stick it through that hole in the back piece there and fold it back on itself, but I've learnt with these plastic plugs that the best laid plans of mice and men don't always turn out. So we're going to pre-tin this, better than pre-something else. Alright, we're going to trim it back after we check a little bit. Yep, we want about half that. Roly-poly you. Roll it over and find the solder spot. Yeah, there you go. And we're going to solder you straight onto the back here. Alright, there we go. She is on. And pull that right through there. I'm not even bothering with the cable clamp there. Okay, now let's, before we power this up, double check that yes, white stripe is in the center and it's not shorted between those two bits, which can happen. Sometimes if this was in a like a portable environment, I would probably set that up with some sort of insulation. Now let's go over the test panel. Off to the right hand side of the desk here is my test panel. I have 12 volts up here. I also have a little banana plug connector here with positive and negative marked. Plug that in and that will give us 12 volts to test everything. So from here we are going to plug in like that, and where's the other end? Up here. We will lift this up and I think we should see a blue light when we turn it on. Yes, we do. Cool. Alright, I have a tester somewhere, let me find that. Move down a little bit. I found my quality tester here. Hopefully I can put this in a way that faces the camera. Let's do it. This is actually going to be a bit of a challenging angle to get. Give me a moment while I stick some more things down. Alright, I have a quality Everready branded USB-C charging cable. We're going to plug it actually into the device that I'm using to film this, which is a Sony Xperia XZ Premium. Let's turn on and see what happens. Alright, so pulling a half amp. I would expect that might pop up in a moment. So let's give it a minute and see what happens. Given it a few minutes and not much has changed. It's bumped up to probably about 600 milliamps or so. Let's move to the second port here. I think they're just two regulators side by side. I don't think there's anything fancy about them. Although we're doing about 800 milliamps on that one. That's interesting. The top port is better. I think there's some shenanigans going on with these little regulators, but anyway, this will charge the tablet. The tablet really doesn't need as much current to charge. It's a cheapy Android tablet. But it is a nice 5 volts even. That's good to see. Alright, now we can actually have a look over at how much current it's pulling on the 12 volt side. There is my current shunt here. Even with everything on my desk, all the 12 volts goes through that current shunt. It's not registering anything. And normally when I turn the lights on here, it registers something. So yeah, let me turn on the illumination. These lights usually pull a little bit. Yeah, it's not pulling a lot of current. So I think we're doing all right. let's move on to the install. Now I'm going to commit sacrilege here. I'm going to use the supplied screws and probably a Phillips head screwdriver, I think, because it's a soft pine bed, so it's been painted to look like hardwood. But anyway, let's go install this. Alright, we've found a good spot to put it, and it's up on the top rail here, or it's the top rail of the bottom bed, but this should help stop the plugs getting snapped off. It's also worth noting I did chuck a little fuse in there. I had a bit of a moment where I realised I should probably add one. I'm hoping there's going to be enough depth of timber to do this. Otherwise I will have to use shorter screws. Also, additionally, these power supplies we use are short circuit protected as well. Alright. We'll be back once I'm finished using the screwdriver. We're pretty well done. We've got a blue light, and now we've got a fancy green cable, a USB or micro USB, and I've managed to unravel it, it seems. So let's plug into the upper port here, and we'll get my apprentice's help to see if it works. So hey apprentice, you want to plug your tablet in to see if it charges?
Oh yes.
Of course, we're not going to show that side of things on camera, of course.
Sure, Grandma. Turning off just
Let's
when
see.
that's go.
Let's go this way and see if we get some charging.
Battery for life.
Yep, battery says it's charging. Cool bananas. Alright,
Thanks, guys.
that pretty well finishes that video. Hope it was interesting. This is what I do for channel filler, so we'll see you in the next serious video where I put a lot of effort into it.